Okay, it looks like we are live here. Let me pull up our participants list. There we go. I love when technology works the way it's supposed to work. Okay, hi everybody. I want to welcome all of our attendees to our real estate market snapshot for the Bay Area. Some crazy stuff going on out there, right? I mean, it's wild what we're seeing, not just in the Bay Area, but in markets across the country, for that matter. So what we're really going to try to do for our guests today, our attendees, is dive a little bit deeper into what we're seeing in the market. If we're able to give a little bit of a crystal ball forecast into what we're seeing beyond that, there's going to be a lot of people right now who, for different reasons, are on the fence, for potentially selling their home or making a move, right? Makes sense. A lot of stuff going on out there. So, what are we seeing happening today? What's our forecast for later on? We're going to give some information on how you, as a potential home seller, can be more competitive and get a higher dollar return on your investment, when you're selling your property. We do have a Q&A box, so feel free to use the chat feature, which is to my right, and the Q&A box, which is to my left here. It's going to look a little bit different on everybody's screen. But if you have questions, we'd love to answer those. We want to provide as much value as we can to what's happening in the market and make sure that we answer your questions. My name is Scott Fuller. I've got a great panel of guests here today. These are some of the best real estate brokers in the Bay Area. Not just my opinion. I mean, if you look at the number of reviews, number of sales, and we're really honored to have a great group of people here. We're going to start with Alex and Denise Lair with Lair Real Estate Group serving the Peninsula. We've also got John Foster. John and his wife Leslie run J&L Real Estate Group with EXP serving the East Bay. We've got David Rendino, his wife Erica, who are with Remax Marketplace, broker owner Remax Marketplace in the North Bay, more specifically Sonoma County. Alex, let's start with you. Why don't you give us kind of the 1-minute rundown of who you guys are, if you would?
Sure. Well, again, I'm Alex, and that's Denise, in case anybody's confused. So, we run Lair Real Estate. It's a family-run business that my dad started back in the 70s, and he'd been a broker back from the 50s. So I've been selling for 37 years on the Peninsula, and born and raised here. Beyond that, though, we actually adjusted the name or rebranded our company to Guide Real Estate because we wanted to adjust to what we do versus just to our last name. So we're really a verb in that area. So we guide a lot of people, but 37 years into the business, and at this point, over 2,700 properties sold. So what we do is just assist people in a variety of capacities, everybody from billionaires to beginners, literally, and dealing with all their real estate, and deal with a lot of estates and trusts, especially now. So many people are dealing with their families, and their parents are transitioning, and passing. How do we help deal with them and navigate all the unwinding of that family ball of yarn and help them? And so we've got a lot of it. Besides that, one last thing, we've got our 4 kids plus our son-in-law that also works with us in the company as well. So it's literally like walking into a sitcom every day.
That's gonna have. Let us know when you launch the reality show. That'll be no. All right. Thanks, Alice. Denise, appreciate you joining us. John, you want to go next?
Appreciate you having us, Scott. My name is John Foster. I run the J&L Real Estate team with my wife, Leslie Foster. We are located specifically in Castro Valley, California, here in the East Bay. And Castro Valley is an interesting market. We've had what's been considered an older community as far as the demographic that has been rapidly changing over the past 10 years for a couple of reasons. Scott, you mentioned migration patterns. We are getting a lot of elderly people that own real estate here that are moving out of state. Half the calls I get, at least, maybe even higher. Hi, John, this is so-and-so from Redwood Road in Castro Valley. We're looking to move to Texas. We're looking to move to Idaho. We're looking to move to Arizona. We're looking to move to Florida. And it's quite interesting. I've been doing this almost 20 years. And we've helped people for that entire time move out of state, move out of the area. Never more than I have seen in the last, I'd say I'd seen that more in the last 3 years than I have ever in my career.
Sure.
It's literally, Scott, it's over half the calls that we get, people are moving out of the area. So it's interesting to see that. People cashing out. A lot of these homes here are paid off. People have owned them, original owners from the 60s and 70s and some of the 80s, cashing out. A lot of our average sales price here is about $1,250,000, ranging all the way up to almost 2 million, but average about $1,250,000. As far as, again, migration patterns, a lot of the buyers we get from Alex and Denise's neck of the woods from the Peninsula that are aspiring buyers, I guess you could call them, that look at your entry price. So you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe 2 million and up. Our entry price is, 900 to $1,300,000, and they look at our zip codes here in the East Bay as affordable housing. That's probably a relative term. Not sure how affordable it is anymore, but interest rates have really kept our market going really, really strong. And yeah, as far as we can probably get more into that in a little bit later, Scott. But yeah, so that's a little bit about myself and my business and our East Bay market. That
awesome. Okay, thanks, John. David, you're up.
My name is David Rendino, and my wife, Erica, and I, we're a husband and wife team, and we own Remax Marketplace in Sonoma County. More specifically, we're in a town that almost nobody knows of called Cotati, which is right in the middle of wine country. So cities like Santa Rosa, Petaluma, Sonoma, Windsor, that's our marketplace. As usual, I messed up and didn't tell Erica about this webinar, but she's the most important one in the group. She's also the broker of record, so she could be fired at any time. So 20 years in the business, over $1 billion in sales. Interestingly enough, I remember Alex and John, we were just talking earlier, from the days of REOs, bank-owned properties, when we had a lot of foreclosures. And so we would have all of these bank-owned properties back in the day, and we would get maybe 5 to 10 listings a day from a lot of these banks. And then we go to these conventions, and that's where I met John and Alex. And the market right now it has the same fever. The only difference is the prices are 3 and 4 times the price that we had back then. So back then, these were banks fire selling properties. Right now, it's a much different, a much stronger economy, but it's the same kind of fever. And that's what we have. And I'm sure we'll talk more about migration patterns in our market. But
so David, about us. Let's start with you. I'd like you to go in a little bit more detail, if you could, on kind of what you're seeing in the market. I mean, obviously, we know we hear that there's low inventory levels. What does that look like, for potential sellers and potential buyers? What should they expect in and around Sonoma County?
That's a good question. So we do updates to our local Press Democrat is the name of the newspaper. And they asked the same question. And my answer was, I've never been in a February where I knew exactly what was going to happen the following year. And I knock on wood when I say that, because I guess, there can be extenuating circumstances. But the reality is we have an inventory problem. We have people moving here from the South Bay, from the East Bay. Every call, it's 510. We put a listing on the market. It's 510, it's 415, 650. They're moving up here, and we don't have the inventory. So that's a recipe for overbids. It's a recipe for a really strong seller's market. Our price points happen to be a lot cheaper than Alex and John's, but nonetheless, that's where we stand today. The other thing is people haven't quite finished their plans from pre-COVID. There were a lot of sellers who were planning on moving who just didn't. They didn't feel comfortable. They didn't want to look for replacement property during the lockdown. So in addition, we're taking care of those people a year later, plus a normal seasonal inventory, plus this frenzy of interest rates, which are just bringing everybody out of the woodwork to buy.
So David, you talked a little bit about, you're getting people from different area codes that are moving in. We've heard a lot recently about what's happening in San Francisco. Obviously, there's a lot of changes in dynamics to commercial property, a lot of leases and subleases that are coming up, huge amounts of space available, and a lot of people who are moving out for areas that are, let's call it, more affordable, but also with more space. How many people are you seeing come in from San Francisco into your areas?
That's a great question. I don't know the number, but I can tell you this. I'm now looking at San Francisco thinking I should buy something there. I've seen condos for $500,000 and $600,000 by the ballpark that I just don't even understand why those are available. other than, the pandemic. So, but yeah, work from home, people, I think everybody agrees that employment is going to look a lot different. So we have a lot more room up here than you do in the Bay Area. And so people, they want pools, they want home offices, they want excellent Wi-Fi. And I think that everybody's gambling that they're going to be able to maybe one day a week drive an hour and a half to the city, check in, and then spend the rest of their time working from home.
Absolutely. Work from home obviously has been a huge, dynamic change. And it's interesting you talk about San Francisco becoming suddenly affordable. There was an article, I think it was maybe in SF Gate or San Francisco Business Journal yesterday, that talked about how it's now, for a lot of people, it's less expensive to live in San Francisco than it is to live in Oakland. And so there's certainly a lot of changes. And just to let our viewers know, we do have real estate brokers of this caliber all across the Bay Area. We wanted to give you kind of a snapshot because it's easier to manage 3 panelists here than it is to manage 12. But it's, always appreciate getting the insight on kind of what's happening, what you guys are seeing in San Francisco. So David, the folks who you're selling homes for in and around Sonoma County, are they staying local? Are they downsizing? Are they staying in California? Are they going out of state?
That's a great question. Erica, my wife, and I keep saying that we keep losing our favorite people. Our favorite clients are leaving, and they're going to Utah, they're going to Tennessee, North Carolina, a lot of Arizona. It's Reno, believe it or not. But yeah, people are leaving. They're leaving for a different quality of life. The same issues that are forcing people to migrate north are also forcing the same people to leave the state.
Got it. Are there, so, North Bay is a little bit unique in that there has been natural disasters, things that have taken place over the last, let's call it 3 to 5 years. Has that factored in, or any aspect of insurance related to real property, has that factored into your clients who are, considering making a move?
Absolutely. If our clients that are in fire-prone areas, which seems to be expanding every single year since 2017, they're done with it. They're really, they don't have a lot of trust in PG&E. They don't like sitting in the dark. They're nervous, right? The reality is that a lot of these things are getting fixed, right? So, we're getting better forest management. PG&E is stepping up their practices, but trauma is trauma. And because of that, there's a lot of people that are trying to leave the area to other areas that just can be a little bit more predictable.
David, we have a question from an attendee here. It says, why are so many people still moving here to Sonoma County despite the dangerous yearly disasters? I am leaving in May 2021 using your firm, Scott, mainly because every year in Sonoma County, we are surrounded by fire. It's been dangerous and life-threatening. How are you still attracting buyers here? Great question, by the way.
It's a great question. Yeah, and the reason is, you have people that work in San Jose, right? You have Google, you have all the tech companies. They don't really have the luxury to leave the state. They they still need to be within a day's drive or a few hours drive of the home office.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main reason we're not seeing people leaving. And you would think, and I agree, like I thought by now we would have an exodus from our market, but the truth is we're replacing those homes faster than we can list them.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, and I think a lot of the work from home has been introduced, but maybe it hasn't been finalized or completely defined, right? So like you said, David, you have the opportunity to work from home, maybe temporarily or part-time, but it's not a ticket to go ahead and say, go anywhere you want. So we're probably not there yet with a lot of employers. Alex, let's turn it over to you and Denise. So tell us a little bit more about kind of what you guys are seeing in the Peninsula, and even maybe getting into, the South San Francisco area or down more towards the South Bay. What are the trends that you're seeing? What's happening in the market there?
Sure. And the way, and just so you know, our dynamic is Denise does a lot of client care where she goes in and helps the clients decide on what to do to the house to depersonalize it, make sure that it meets the market. And she studies the market as to where we get the best values out of it. And then she actually helps the client align their property to that. to make sure that we're getting, max drive, especially in this marketplace. So if I do more of the talking, that's why she's truly the brains of the outfit, but I'm the mouthpiece. So,
and we'll definitely get to that part of it a little later on, right? Because we do want to talk about what can give you better value. So absolutely, Denise.
Absolutely. And if I can zoom out for 1 second, just because this is a question that I hear a lot, and it's something to just keep in mind for everybody. A lot of people keep wondering, is this a boom like 2008? And I hear that, I get people asking me that quite a bit.
Of course.
And I just want to frame that for a second as to what some of the distinctions are that are a little bit different. Well, in 2008, the problem really started in 2006. Normally, the average age of a buyer is 33 years old. And at 33 years old is when most people are at their peak buying, getting into real estate, or buying their first or second homes. There's a lot of activity around that. Well, in 2006, we actually saw a drop in the buyers. And at that point, the market was still being supplied with developers overdeveloping. So we had a demand problem and we had a supply problem. We had oversupply and under demand. Here's the reason why in 2006, the buyers dropped off. 33 years before 2006 was 1973. That was the year abortion was legalized in the United States and the birth rate dropped. So we had a 33-year lag that showed up in 2006. And as a result, we saw that drop and then the oversupply. We had a market, plus with false lending, that created the perfect storm that turned into that cataclysmic explosion. Mm-hmm. So conversely speaking now they just during COVID, 88 million millennials said they want to buy a home this year. 88 million. The problem we have now is we have a hyperdrive on people wanting to buy because they realize the value of shelter. Secondly, during COVID, there was disruption, supply chain disruption, development disruption. They couldn't supply the market with new properties and everything else. Now we also compound that with all the fires and all the devastation that's taking place. Material costs are skyrocketing. So now we've got the opposite storm that actually has more kindle wood to keep this fire burning than we've had in a long time. So on a macro level, this market does not look like it has any real big storm clouds coming. In our market now, I'll zoom in a little bit on the Peninsula. The biggest disruption we could potentially see is if the equity markets, the Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ, if those get devastated, that's where a lot of our buyers have their down payments because they're paid with so much equity in their companies. If that goes down, psychologically, it interrupts them. They've still got plenty of money. They've still got plenty of assets, but they sit on the sidelines and hold back for a minute. That would be probably the only, a major thing. Interest rates could be, but I don't expect those to be making any dramatic moves. So now that I've gone through, the macro, zoom in a little bit, our buyers are coming out of San Francisco as fast as they can get out. And the interesting part is during COVID, most people realized, again, back to shelter value, they didn't want to be living, touching houses. They wanted a backyard. They wanted someplace to be able to have what we call Zoom room, or, and that's actually why Sonoma County and the East Bay, they've become, instead of boom towns, Zoom towns, where people can now go move and work and have more freedom, more space around them. And the East Bay, especially, you're in the North Bay, you guys have much bigger lots than we do, bigger areas. So there's a lot of people moving for that. But San Francisco is our primary driver. And the one thing about that as well on the Peninsula is we're seeing a lot of the fact that we've got this big buying demand right now, and we don't even have the borders open. Meaning when we see foreign investment coming back, even though everybody says, oh, the United States is screwed, you got to remember, we're still the best of the worst in the world. People love to land bank in the United States. And as a result, when that demand also increases in this area, we're still going to see a pretty robust market, from outside foreign investment once that catches hold again. So I know I kind of jumped around a little bit, but there's a bigger view that's supporting us. Then we've got a large migration plus a potentially shadow migration that's going to start again once we get these borders opened up.
Alex, when we talk about kind of the competition, because that's what, sellers have an expectation. If I put my house on the market and if I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing to have it marketed correctly and ready for sale, how many offers would you typically get? And I know that varies amongst price point. And how many days of inventory are on the market right now in general in the peninsula?
In San Mateo County, we study the market every Monday. We break down every city, what the inventory amounts are. On average, most cities are sitting just at less than 1 month of inventory on the market. Some cities have 2 weeks on the market. So this is the other thing that COVID has exacerbated that people don't get, but be mindful of this. There's a capacity that, like John talked about, where a lot of his people are, they've got a lot of people, a lot of homes that are free and clear. Those people, let's say if they normally would have, and even on the peninsula, inventory that normally would have come to market because those people were moving to care facilities or they were moving to retirement homes, they were going to transition themselves into different living arrangements. When COVID hit, they go, I'm not going to a care home. Are you kidding me? That's like a death sentence. Mm-hmm. So those people now have stayed put. So that's also put a further lid on inventory that organically would have come to market. Mm-hmm. So what we're seeing from that standpoint is, there's still a lot of about a month's supply as a whole. The demand is still increasing. But the one thing about it, if a house has a wonky floor plan, if it's got a driveway that's kind of weird, or, it's got something that doesn't necessarily flow, those homes may sit a little bit longer on the market, but the market's still absorbing.
So when we talk about absorption rates, because a lot of people may not be familiar with that. And so you mentioned maybe we've got 2 to 4 weeks of inventory. That doesn't necessarily mean that your home is going to be on the market for 2 to 4 weeks before you get an offer. Can you give us kind of frame that a little bit differently? What does that mean, 2 to 4 weeks of inventory?
Well, what that typically means is 2 to 4 weeks is an average, an overall average, but that includes some of the homes that may stay on the market for 4 to 6 months because they're unique or their price point. Mm-hmm. If we're under 2.5 million on the peninsula and it's in a good area, decent home in a good area, you're going to see, typically we have a 7-day market cycle. Mm-hmm. From the time we put it on, we could get offers in 24 to 48 hours, but we're not giving the sellers the proper opportunity to have the buyers really see their property.
100%. Yep.
So for that reason, we normally run about a 7, maybe a 10-day maximum cycle of marketing a property before we'll strike for offers. And, I use the analogy, it's like holding back the tide. You want to let the dam build the tide and then release it. And that velocity of buyers will actually help drive the price for the sellers.
Maximum exposure, right? That's what we're looking for.
That's it.
Where are you guys seeing people go to? What are some of the hot spots that people from the area are going to?
Yeah, I just actually wrote a note down of in the last 2 weeks where our clients have been going. It's Scottsdale, Austin, El Dorado, Sacramento, South Carolina, Florida, and Colorado. And that's just in the last 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Colorado. Yeah. Also Colorado and Texas. I forgot those. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Alice and Denise. John, why don't you, let's get you back on this because I want you to talk a little bit more about what you're seeing in the East Bay market. And I think you're on mute, but we want to, I know that, you live in Castro Valley, but you obviously serve a huge territory along, kind of the 680, 880 corridor there in the East Bay. Tell us what you're seeing as far as, competitiveness, number of offers, days on market. What does that look like right now, today's snapshot?
Yeah, that's a great question, Scott. Yeah, we service the entire East Bay, primarily consisting of Alameda and Contra Costa County. Yeah, as far as your question about inventory, and it's kind of the overwhelming message of the call here today, we have an inventory crisis. There's a few things that I am very hopeful about that we just have to wait and see what plays out. And Scott, I'm not sure how many of your the attendees today are familiar with Prop 19 passing. There's been some buzz. I know I can speak for our team in particular, have had quite an increase in inquiries about transferring their tax base. Before, it was only within the participating counties of the state. I think it was 12. Someone can correct me here if I'm wrong. Now you can transfer your tax base if you qualify with Prop 19 passing statewide.
Sure.
So you've mentioned some things with Alex. You made a good point about COVID. We were going to move, COVID happened. Now there's some obvious concerns with that, and we want to stay put. So where 2 months before COVID, we were going to list the house, we're not going to do that anymore. Hopefully that subsides a little bit. We have had a lot of recent sellers, Scott, you might find this interesting, that are now fully vaccinated. And they've said, John, we're fully vaccinated. we were ready to list the home.
Yeah.
And so I do think that, so I guess the message there with the hopefulness to maybe loosen up the inventory problem is as more people get vaccinated, their confidence to finally, in fact, the couple that we're working with right now that called us a few weeks ago, got their vaccinations, are moving to Michigan, and they were waiting to get vaccinated. So that's freeing up more inventory. On average, Scott, I want to answer your question. On average, it's the same as what Alex said. We've got a 7 to 10 day market cycle here. If there's a little bit of an obsolete floor plan or location issue or some other functional issue, the house may sit on the market a little bit longer, but for the most part, it's a 7 day market cycle. And don't mean to bounce around too much here, but we talk about we call home prep a lot, and we get a lot of calls. It's like, John, we know the market's really, really hot. We know that the average list price versus sale price is at least 10%, sometimes higher. I can tell you for the East Bay markets, on average, for every single listing, again, these are average numbers, we've got 15 buyers competing for every listing. So I'm not saying that to discourage buyers. Our team also gets a lot of offers accepted. Mm-hmm. But for sellers, it's a seller's dream come true as far as market conditions are concerned. I would encourage anybody considering moving inside the state to inquire with any of us here on this panel today about Prop 19. So you can learn a little bit more about it. I would inquire anybody looking to move outside of state to still inquire with us about a plan to properly prep your home. Even though your home's going to sell for a lot of money in this market, and that is exciting, there are some very simple and often inexpensive things you can do to strategize on the presentation of your home. Denise, maybe you can share a little bit more about some of your strategies with that. We'd love to hear about them. But where you can truly sell that home, if it was going to be for $1.4 million, maybe it could be $1.475 million with some simple strategies in preparing that home for sale. Happy to expand on that, Scott, but hopefully that answered some of your questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, John. And you mentioned Prop 19, which has really been a huge thing. I mean, half of it has been great, and the other half, which a lot of people didn't know about, is a complete shock. We actually did a webinar probably about a month ago, which is on the website, Leaving the Bay Area. It's under the podcast tab. But we had a fantastic panelists. We had a couple of attorneys and a CPA, and we got very, very deep into that. So if anybody happened to miss that but wants to see a replay, it is located on the website. Had a couple of questions here. I want to make sure that we answer. Suzanne asked, I don't see anybody from Napa County on the panel. Suzanne, that's really just more of a matter of, love to have people from Napa, from San Jose, from, Santa Cruz, all these different areas. It's just easier to kind of, tighten this up to 45 minutes to an hour and just, kind of get a select group, which if any questions you have on Napa, we're certainly happy to get you in front of the right person. Another question, Sylvia asked, will home prices come down in San Francisco? Alex, you're nodding there, so why don't you want to give us some of your input on that?
Well, even now we own property in San Francisco, and we're watching some of our rents roll back. We actually, on a couple of our listings, we're listing an expired property next week that was in San Francisco. It's been with 2 agents, and Denise is going through and helping him try and figure out how to mitigate the damage that's occurring with this price erosion, and how we're trying to figure out, just on, like I always say, when a football player throws a football to a receiver running down the field, he throws it out in front so they can intersect. Equally, so we're trying to figure out how fast the market's retreating so we can get a price aligned to where the market will intersect that as well. So we are seeing some prices in some areas having greater impact. So the answer is there's hot pockets and there's not. You can't just broad base and paint the whole market the same, but there are some areas that are really facing headwinds. So we just look at micro markets more in San Francisco.
It's interesting you say that, Alex. The question on this is because we have a client who's looking to do a 1031 exchange, and he's got a property in San Francisco and it's leased. And obviously right now, with the local and federal COVID protections in place for tenants, it's very hard, to sell a property. And so he's hoping that his tenant realizes, hey, he can get get a rental somewhere else for a better property for cheaper. So he's hoping that his tenant recognizes that and volunteers, to vacate the property so he can get, we can get it listed and get it sold.
Yep.
David, I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you going to say about that?
I was making a horrible joke about loving Hot Pockets.
I haven't had one of those in a while. Yeah.
My guilty pleasure.
Yeah, they're good. Okay, so another question before we move on. Given the recent tragedies in Texas, do you believe your customers regret moving there? And do you think migration to Texas will be stymied by this recent adverse weather event? I'm happy to take that one on because we've moved a lot of people to Texas. And, just given the conversations, I think that for people who have recently moved there or for people who have been there for a long time, what happened there was an absolute shock. I mean, you've got two pieces of it. You've got the climate piece of it, which caused the problems there, which I think, as most people realize, that is not the norm there. And I don't think that anybody's concerned that that will be, a typical weather pattern in the future for them living there. And then you have the other piece of it, which is, the utilities down there and how that, maybe how that affects people's viewpoint on it. I don't think that that creates much of a change at all in people's opinion of Texas. Texas has a huge draw right now. It's, it's number one state in the country for, for business growth, business relocation, as well as population, specifically Austin. So I don't see, much of any changes along those lines. Alex, one more question here for you. Do you see the Half Moon Bay area staying strong?
Ironically enough, we've been touting Half Moon Bay forever. We think it's a phenomenal market. People don't realize what a true jewel it is. And now our kids are in their late 20s and their friends are going, have you guys heard about Half Moon Bay? Oh my God. And it's becoming, because Half Moon Bay serves two markets. It serves people that want a second home, a Zoom town, where they can go and retreat and be near the beach and have that vibe. And then it's also becoming a real young person's enclave as well. And if you want to.
Yeah. And also too, with people not commuting to work, it's keeping that 92 corridor freer. Whereas people were discouraged to sit in traffic during the Pumpkin Festival for 3 hours to get
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so David, you're being called the class clown, which is, I think, in a loving way. Excellent seminar so far. Thanks for the feedback, Pat. David, did you want to talk about? We did have a question about insurance in Sonoma County. Obviously, you're not an insurance broker, but maybe you can go into a little bit of to answer that question.
Yeah, it's an important question. And so after the 2017 fires, there were price gouging ordinances that were put into effect. So anything from rental increases, theoretically it's supposed to cover construction, materials, everything, commodities. Well, the only thing that's really gotten enforced is rents. So we have 5 different kinds of rent control in Sonoma County. And insurance, there were laws that went into effect where they couldn't raise their premiums until now. And so right now we're starting to see a doubling of premiums. So for some reason, they're not subject to price gouging. I don't know why. It is what it is. It's a little bit of a political conversation. But if you look at our fire areas, so we have Fountain Grove was hit really hard. We have some areas like kind of out by Kenwood. Those are very expensive areas. And the reality is, even though insurance is doubling, it's not enough to hurt that market. The people that are buying those homes and building there, they can afford it. So then we have Coffee Park. For whatever reason, the insurance premiums are really not going up too much in Coffee Park. But what's happening right now is you have the same players. You have State Farm, Allstate. And what's happening is people are going to these companies to renew their policies, and they're finding out that they're doubling and they're stopping. They're saying, wow, it's too expensive to get insurance. But if they kept calling more companies, they will find that there are some companies that are still affordable. The ones that have doubled their premiums, they essentially don't underwrite there. So if you're crazy enough to pay those premiums, they'll outsource it to another company. So we just lost our first deal from insurance, kind of a first time home buyer property. So we'll see where it goes. Right now, it hasn't affected the market. I think over time it will. It's not so much of a today problem, though.
Great explanation. Thank you, David. That's awesome. We had a question on the location of the Prop 19 webinar link. I just posted the link into the chat panel right there. Let's see here. David, let's shoot this one to you. Do you have any market insights for Marin? Does it fall into the same demographics as the buyers in your areas, or because of pricing, is it a tougher sell? David, I know you do some business in Marin County. Why don't you give us some insight on that?
Yeah, we do serve Marin, and Marin is hotter than I've ever seen it. And it's the same thing. It's people moving up the 101 corridor. So you have your San Francisco, you have your East Bay, you have the same markets that Alex and John would service. They just are stopping in Marin. And then you have others who are just moving a little bit more up the freeway. Those are people that are looking for a little bit more of a value play. But no, absolutely, Marin is hotter than we've ever seen it. And again, the same outlook. I don't expect that to change at all this year.
Okay, fantastic. Cliff asks, what do you see in Santa Cruz County, North Monterey County? So what we're seeing is it's still very strong. We're seeing a lot of demand in those areas. Alex, do you have any insight into that, since you're just probably over the 17 from there?
Well, we the irony is we're seeing like, for example, we do a lot of estate and trust work, and we, get people that have family portfolios. So we're doing a couple for an attorney that he wanted us to handle in Boulder. And we're getting people, tech buyers, that are looking for little retreat, again, the retreat cabin, second home type of market within about an hour and a half radius of the Bay. That market's very brisk, and Boulder's doing well. We've also had another client that's at Apple, and he's pretty high up the food chain. He just bought his second home in Santa Cruz because he wants to be able to run down there with the kids and be able to. So we're, I can't say that I have really clear optics. We're seeing a trend, though, that it's really the second home market, especially because the stock market's doing so well. People have so much capacity. They're deploying it into real estate, especially if they're companies like an Apple that have done so well. They still like hard assets as a diversity in their portfolios. So they're saying, hey, you know what? Why don't we get that second home? And even if the markets tank, on the equity side, we still have something that we enjoy.
Absolutely. A couple other questions here. Can someone speak to the Gilroy area, and then also Carmel Valley? From what we're hearing from our partners who service those areas, still very strong. There's a lot of demand in those areas. A lot of people who are moving from the San Francisco Bay Area into the, kind of the North Monterey County, farther north into Santa Cruz, areas like that. So obviously a lot of this is relative to price point. Alex, as you talked about before, if you're getting under, let's say maybe $2.5 million, there's going to be a larger buyer pool for your property. And so that's going to get, quite a bit more. So it really, I think, just depends on the price point that you're at. But it's still, as with every market in the country right now, with a couple of exceptions, every market is still very strong. Let's get into a little bit about, kind of what we talked about this a little bit, but let's get a little bit farther into this. I'd love to get each of your individual outlooks on 2021. What are you seeing for the rest of this year? And even if you wanted to go out a little bit farther than that, what are the trends? What are you forecasting? Throw it out there. Who's got
that one?
John, you want to start?
Scott, I'm optimistic, and I'm hopeful that we will see a slight uptick in inventory. However, I think the disclaimer on that, as we say in real estate, full disclosure, I really think that the things that I'm sure all of us are paying attention to. So why would the inventory go up? I think interest rates are going to have a lot to do with that. We saw a slight uptick in rates over the past 2 weeks. I don't think that's a trend where rates are just all of a sudden going to start going up. But again, we should be monitoring interest rates, because that is going to have a direct impact on buyers' buying power. So we want to keep an eye on that. Some of this Prop 19, Prop 19 goes into effect April 1st. It's too early to say if that's going to have an impact where people say, that's the one thing I was waiting for is Prop 19. And now that we have it, we're going to list the house. I'm not certain that's going to move the needle on inventory, but it might. It just might. So as far as the outlook for the rest of the year, I think it's going to be more of the same. Inventory shortage, unless some of those factors change. I think it's going to be a situation where sellers should really look at getting an accurate analysis if they're considering moving. Your service is invaluable, Scott. You're providing information nationwide to any seller who's considering moving out of state. I know you get a lot of calls. They say, we're thinking of moving out of state. We don't even know which state. So Scott, your service is amazing to help guide people. And maybe it's Texas for one reason or Colorado for another reason. The one thing I'll kind of close with this is an accurate market analysis for your property. Reach out to Scott or reach out to one of us. Zillow's great. Redfin has got some good algorithms as well. I will tell you personally what I am seeing is people are checking a Redfin algorithm, a Zillow algorithm. They're thinking their home is worth X. And they talk to me. I'll give you a perfect example. We're closing a home next week for $250,000 over any closed comparable sale. So it's nothing against Zillow. It's nothing against Redfin. Their algorithms cannot keep up with the data as fast as these homes are selling. And again, they're micro markets. Alex made a perfect point. It's this little pocket here that is just defying all the comps. And, you know, half a mile to the south, it's not for one reason or another.
Yeah.
So I would say if you're really interested in selling and you're in what we call the information gathering stage, work with a qualified local agent that's going to provide you with an accurate market analysis of your home. I will tell you, you might be surprised in a good way of what your home's truly worth.
John, to kind of piggyback on that, and I'm really glad that you brought that up because what we're seeing right now, and on our websites, on leavingthebarrier.com and leavingsocal.com, we have the automated home value feature, right? So we use an API that's similar to Zillow that goes through all, the data points of what it can access, and it's limited, to give you, kind of the value range. What we're seeing right now is the market is so dynamic that these automated value systems, including ours, are not able to give you a very accurate value. So what we had talked about before, the five of us, was providing an opportunity to help people get an idea of what their home is worth, and we'll call it more of a manual, type of a thing here. So on the website, we have a form. If you're interested to find out what your home is worth, and again, this isn't the automated thing that you're going to get. This is going to be either Alex, John, David, or our partners in a specific area that you live, either doing one of two things. If you're comfortable having them come by your house and take a look, and again, be able to provide the data and to give you a real-time estimate of the current value, then we can do that. Or if it's something where you're not really comfortable yet having somebody come in the house, but we can do this virtually for you, we're happy to do that, because again, I agree with John. The market is so fast moving that we can't, a lot of those websites can't possibly keep up with the current data, specifically pending sales, because they don't have that data, right? Usually. So I just put a link into that. You can go into a couple ways to get it. I posted a link here, or you can go to www.currenthousevalue.com. Very simple, currenthousevalue.com. Just fill out the form, and then we'll make sure that we get back to you on that. So John, thanks for bringing that up. David, tell us a little bit about kind of what are you forecasting for, the rest of 2021? You're on mute. There we go.
I was on mute because my dog is barking in the background, so let's hope he doesn't bark. The joys of working from home. So again, I've never been more sure of a market, as I'm sort of pessimistic by nature, and so I've never been as sure as we are in this market. Okay, there is a caveat, and John hit on it, and it's interest rates. And the interest rates went up essentially about a half a point. And I've never cheered so loud for interest rates to go up, because the reality is this market is frothy right now. Mm-hmm. And the frothier it gets, the more nervous I get, because it's just not supposed to be like this. And so my hope is that, okay, with that little raise, okay, it might take a little bit of that frothiness out, because we're in this for the long haul, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody wants the market to be good for 6 months. They want it to be good, right? So it's going to be strong. It's going to continue to go up. The question is, has it gone up, in the first part of the year? Is it done all of it's going up, or are we going to, kind of keep experiencing 10% growth? I don't really know about that. I do think that interest rates are going to play into cooling it down a little bit. I will tell you, just anecdotally, we've had a couple of properties, one in particular, we just listed at 669, right? So we're a totally different price point on our average than these guys. And so, we priced it there because there was a property across the street, same floor plan, just closed at 705, and it needs at least 50,000 in work. So long story short, that property, we got an offer at 775 with no contingencies. That property that just closed at 705, I mean, there's no basis in reality for this here. So, will it continue at that pace? I don't think so. It's hard to imagine it will as we start getting more inventory, but it's going to be strong. And so, if you're a seller and you're thinking about moving, you're going to be fine. You don't have to rush into selling today. It's not like that kind of thing. Interest rates will go back to where they were after this pandemic, right? So if we were around 5, we're going back to 5. The question is when. And your answer is going to be there. When they're back to 5, you'll see more of a leveling market, maybe even slightly decline. As far as, there's a question about middle class, it's true that the middle class is being squeezed. But that's part of the reason we're so popular up here, is because middle class can still afford a home in Sonoma County. Mm-hmm. And so, we're not in the kind of market where you guys are getting $3 and $4 million anythings. That's not who we are. When we have a $3 million property, it's really something special. Yeah. So I think that's, again, part of the appeal of people moving up the freeway.
Mm-hmm. And David, Alex, I do want to get to you. So David, as you were talking about that, somebody had mentioned kind of what you just mentioned here. Is there any middle class inventory left in the Bay Area anymore? And this is a primary reason for people leaving. Historically, and we've always seen this, right? You drive east till you qualify. So if you can't qualify along the coastal areas or in San Francisco, you're going to keep driving. Well, you're going to drive farther now. Areas like, get out to areas like Livermore used to be fairly reasonable. Alex, I know that you've got some real estate interests out there, but more and more people are now going out to Tracy, out to the Central Valley. So is the middle class being driven out of the Bay Area? Well, there might be some truth to that, but I think a lot of people are just looking for, is there a better opportunity? Is there a better financial situation for myself and potentially a better lifestyle somewhere else? And if that keeps me in California, yes. In most cases, it's taking people, to areas that are outside of California. One other thing, I want to thank Linda. She mentioned you guys are providing amazing service. Thank you for the real estate contacts you connected me with in Virginia and Oregon. And Nikki Stevens had asked, where are the most affordable cities in the Bay Area? Alex, I don't think they're in your backyard. So let's maybe have John and David mention a couple of areas that we'll call relatively affordable.
I would
area. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, John.
Oh, I was just going to say, what is the definition of affordable? I mean, it's maybe an odd question to ask, but I get people coming into the East Bay saying, "Oh my gosh, the prices are super affordable here." I go, "Well, where are you from?" But we get the flip side of that as well, that it's not affordable. I think it's, what is the definition of affordable? I would, again, this goes back to buying power. Some buyers, I would say, that haven't gotten in depth with a lender are actually really surprised at what they can afford. Rates being as low as they are, still, I would say in the probably around the 3% range at this point. That is incredible buying power. Absolutely incredible buying power. And the main thing, and I just maybe could, on the affordability topic, just leave everybody with this. We tell our buyers that we represent, obviously we want to do a good job. We've got a fiduciary duty to represent them the way they deserve to be. Try to focus more on the monthly payments, because that's what you're stuck with every month. It's not to ignore the price. I'm not saying to ignore the price, but really dive deep with a mortgage broker on what the payment is. And you might be surprised. It could be lower than you think. And again, David, you said it perfectly. Is that going to change as rates go up? Absolutely. That puts downward pressure on pricing and demand, and it affects the economics of it to where our market conditions will change. As of today, rates are still extremely low when you look at history. So hope that makes sense. But I would really look at what the payment is associated with that purchase price. You might be surprised it could be less than you think.
Great advice, John. Okay, Pam, we are going to get to your question, I promise. Alex, let's get to you. What's your crystal ball for 2021?
Well, for 2021 at this point, the hounds are loose, and I don't think you're going to get them back in the kennel. You know, it's going to keep running, and we've got a pretty strong market, dynamic market. Also, on the Peninsula specifically, we don't have the resource of land to be able to supply the marketplace. So the demand on the limited resources we have is continuing, and like I said, as we see the borders open up, I think we'll see even more pressure on that resource of the existing real estate. And this is what I was going to say earlier. If you take any of the major economic centers and take an hour and a half, take a radius within an hour and a half of, whether it be San Francisco, whether you take San Jose, because within an hour and a half of San Jose, you're talking about Gilroy, you're talking about Carmel, you're talking about all those areas. Those areas all are going to benefit from the economic plume of people leaving the Bay Area, but as John said, still needing to stay within commuting distance. So those areas will organically get the benefit of everybody rushing out. The ones that are going to leave the state, God love them, they're going to leave the state. But the ones that need to stay in some proximity, those other areas are going to continue to see the support. And then what will infill back into the major economic hubs will be a lot of the foreign buyers. Because remember, we're going, man, I got to get out of the city. I can't be here anymore. It's driving me nuts. And then everybody else is moving in the city going, compared to the country I just left, this feels like I got acreage around me. So it's back to it's all about our perceptions and our realities. So that's how we constantly replenish the market. We'll have another event, a pandemic, an earthquake, something, then we'll see the flush out again. So from my perspective, market will remain really strong. Economics will remain really strong. The material costs, labor costs, and everything are driving up. So even on new construction, all of that is going to keep spiraling. That also supports existing construction, the resale markets as well, as it's holding values and keeping them strong. So, barring a black swan event in the equity markets, I'm pretty bullish.
Yeah, Alex, that's a good point, because we've seen lumber at almost an all-time high right now. I mean, just material costs are very high. And obviously in the Bay Area, labor costs are extremely high. And so that really accounts into, when you're factoring in housing prices, you have to account for all of this. Let's talk about a few of the demand drivers for what's going on in the market right now. A lot of people ask, why is it so crazy? Where are all these buyers coming from, in the areas that you guys service? Well, one is we've got a wave of millennials who are now entering their peak home buying years. The number of Americans aged 25 to 34 was 12% higher in July 2020 than July 2010. And so there's 4.9 people that fit into that category. So you have more millennials who are in that position or that age range to purchase something. We've talked a little bit about mortgage interest rates as well. I mean, historically speaking, mortgage rates have gone up a little bit, let's call it, in the last few weeks here, but we're still hovering around or just over 3% for a 30-year fix, which is unbelievable. And we don't expect, the feds to change the overnight lending rate. However, we're going to see some pressure on the 10-year treasury, which is going to have an impact and will, eventually raise those interest rates. But for right now, they're low. Some people would call it artificially low. The third thing is, obviously, COVID has allowed a lot of people, the ability to move. We talked about the migration, the ability to work from home, even if it's temporary or, just a few days a week, to move out of San Francisco, to move out of, some of the more expensive areas. So that's what is driving demand right now. But again, I think a couple things are going to happen. A lot of the clients that we talk to who are thinking about making a move have put it off because of COVID concerns. Now, these are valid concerns because a lot of these folks are, retirement age. Okay, so they're looking at it saying, this is a safety issue to me. But once I feel comfortable, whether it's with the COVID numbers being down or whether I get my first and second vaccination shot, that's when you're going to start seeing a lot more property come on the market. And so if we look at, and I think President Biden is looking at potentially by the end of July to have, we'll call it the majority of Americans, vaccinated, or those who are electing to get vaccinated. Once we meet that mark or we get closer to that mark, I think we're going to see a lot more people raise their hand and say, okay, I'm finally ready to do something that I've been putting off for the last year and a half or year because of COVID. I think that's going to change the dynamic a lot as well. So a lot of things changing. Jerry, I think that Alex may have just answered your question. Are you seeing people moving to the Bay Area from other states or people just fleeing? Well, obviously there's people coming in, Alex, and I'm sure all of you guys are seeing this. I mean, there's still jobs to be had here. There's still people coming in from areas like the Northeast, from Chicago, from overseas who are coming in with very high paying jobs. Are you guys seeing that?
We took a flyer. There's somebody who wanted to move from Utah to Sonoma County. So we took a flyer to see if we can help them. We hate to work with people when we just think we can't help them. And they gave up yesterday. How do you explain to somebody that they need to come in 50,000, 10% over list with no contingencies? You can't. And so, after weeks, I mean, they even flew out here to get a lay of the land. And it's really, really hard to represent somebody moving to our area. Not saying it can't be done, it can, but they need to have a really strong spine.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so let's get into more of, because I know we're running a little bit short on time, but I want to make sure we get this in. And Pam asked this specifically. And Denise I know that she's the master at this. What can you do? Obviously, we know it's a very fast moving market, but you, as a seller, you want to maximize the return on investment on your property. Denise, we'll start with you on this one. What can people do to get top dollar for their home?
Sure. So a couple of things you can do, and they seem pretty basic, but it's no cost approaches. Obviously, clean your house. Take on declutter that house.
Denise, you have to tell people that? Or
yeah, you really do. I tell them, Maria Kondo, have her be your best friend on YouTube. She teaches it all the time. But really the cleaning part of it is, it's amazing on how just cleaning your windows makes a big difference on people walking into your house. But then the also part, the other, if you want to spend a lot of money, or a little bit of money, which is what John was mentioning, how a little bit goes a long way, which is the basic of painting the interior and floors. That's the best bang for your buck. And it's when Alex mentioned some wonky floor plans, which we do get, the Winchester Mystery House, which another room added on to, the consistency on color in the interior makes all the difference in the world. So those are just simple things to do. I know the influencers in our area are still Pottery Barn, Restoration Hardware. People being home more, they watched a lot more of the Studio McGee on Netflix series, and Joanna Gaines, of course. But it's true, it's what they.
I don't know what that is.
And then the big thing that with staging, I own a staging company as well. And what we see is because of obviously with people working from home, that Zoom room, which Alex mentioned, is a huge factor for people. They need to see it visually. And we've even sheetrocked storage sheds in the backyard. And rather than keeping the lawnmower in them, we made them homework rooms or Zoom rooms. And it just gives the mindset as, oh, wow, I can actually have some peace of mind and do my conference calls outside.
That's awesome right there, because people are looking for the use of the home is completely different now, right? Your buyers are coming in and they're saying, okay, now we're like, we've got family climbing all over us. Everybody's home all the time. We need, separate areas to perform work. We need to make sure, that our internet speeds are working well, right? It's conducive to a work environment. I love that.
And if I could dovetail onto one thing Denise does really well is people love open concept from a living space. You want to have, that's become the rage where, they want more open concept, more collision space, conversation space, all of that. But that isolated working space has really become, that's why with that, taking the tool sheds or what have you. The other thing that Denise does really well is 99% of the buyers, especially during COVID, are seeing the properties online first. So everything she's doing is around the camera shot. And so she'll do everything from, and she does everything from kitchen remodels, bathroom remodels. She'll go as extensive as it needs to be, because the demographic on the peninsula primarily is they don't like construction because they're typically engineers. So they don't like construction because of the amount of decisions it takes, and they wind up with decision fatigue. And as a result, they would rather have somebody else make those decisions and just give them a finished product. So, and the other piece to that is they don't want to have a lot of contractors coming in and out of the house because of the potential spread of COVID. So if you finish the house and dress it up, I say lipstick and makeup before the party. Sometimes you do need maybe a little extra push up, but beyond that, you want to shine it up before you get to the marketplace. The buyers in the marketplace will pay a premium for that. So.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. David, let's point this over to you. So what updates in the home bring the most value? What's going to give you your best ROI? And tell us a little bit about what you guys do for staging.
Yeah, and I can answer that. I can answer both of those things. So I'll use my Utah buyer antidote. So we spent the week showing them homes. The best homes that we showed them were the ones that were vacant. They didn't show well. There were some that had like socks on the floor. Those were the best homes. The ones that they wanted to write on were the ones that had nice couches in there that were staged nicer. So that probably made those sellers 30 to 40,000 more. So staging is remarkably important. And so my wife, if she were here, she would tell you that we started staging homes about a year ago for our clients, and we don't charge for it. We do it. And we did it kicking and screaming because it's really something. I mean, Erica has that expertise. I don't. It started, we'd have our garage full with stuff, and now we have like 3 storage units. So the reason we do it is it just makes our clients more money. And so when you have a seller who just can't afford the $5,000 to stage it, we're like, well, we can do it. And we would go to rent a center and we would, just stage it. And we're like, okay, that costs us, $1,000 when we sold this house. So we started doing that. And then we started making more of an investment. It is extremely important. And so the other thing in terms of like, what kind of upgrade should you do? I can answer that by, I would need to see the house to make that recommendation. Because like Alex said, it could be the Winchester house, and it could be that we need to improve the floor plan, or it could be that we need to, do some floor coverings. But when we do our market analysis, we do up to 3 different values. We do a as is, which is like, let's put the sign in the ground today. Let's do a fully remodeled as if we made it this amazing luxury house. And then 2 are partially repaired, which is usually what our recommendation is. So what's been happening is we would start down a path, and then by the time we would get all of our bids, we'd figure everything out. And then by the time we actually have to pay a contractor to do something, we're looking at the market saying, wait a minute, we don't really have to do it. The inventory is really low right now. Let's put it on the market. Let's do a few things. Let's stage it. Let's clean it really well. Let's pick up the socks off the floor. Just kidding. And what's happening right now is we're actually getting it. But the reality is, that answer to upgrades, it's a very personal question. And you do need to talk to your realtor about that.
Yeah. As we're talking about this, there's a lot of people who are thinking, okay, what types of repairs do I need to do, right? You want to do the ones that statistically speaking are going to give you the best return on investment for the money that you're spending. And so, for a lot of people, if you're not sure what that is, and if you want some advice, obviously our panelists here are happy to do that, whether it's in person, or again, if you're more comfortable with something being done virtually, where you're just kind of doing, scanning around the house and here's what I've got, and we, make recommendations on that as well. But if you want, if you'd like some assistance with that, regardless of where you're located, again, you can go to thecurrenthousevalue.com, and we can help you, kind of put that together and give you a strategy that makes sense and give you a few options as well. Because David, I think that's great. And I know Alex, John, you guys offer this as well. You're giving them, here's some different options. It doesn't have to be, you've got to spend, $100,000 and this kitchen's got to be completely gutted and you have to do this. It shouldn't be like that. It should be, here's what makes sense and here's why you should do it. John, why don't you give us kind of, tell us what updates are people requesting? What helps people sell? And another question that Pat asks, what are some of the hot kitchen and house interior colors? And they're not socks. I'm going to get, that's a...
No, pick up the socks.
not a home selling, yeah.
It'd be hard to add on top of what David and Alex and Denise already said. The one thing I think is pretty relevant to mention, David, you said this, it's always ideal to have a vacant home that it's sort of a blank canvas at that point, right, David? Bring your stager in, do whatever you want to do to stage the home, get it photographed, no problem. I don't want anybody that's one of our attendees today to get discouraged if you may not, for whatever reason, don't have the option to vacate your home. I really, honestly, please don't get discouraged if you don't have that option. We will work with you, or any of the local partners that Scott works with that he can recommend to you. We can work with you on a solid plan where you can still live in the home, and we can do what we call, a half stage, or work with some of the existing furniture that you have. It might even be a pod. Pods are great, right? You can load the pod up with some of the things that aren't going to be beneficial for staging, and then work with our teams to partially stage the rest of your home. So I want to encourage those possible attendees that might be watching that say, gosh, I can't move out. I need to live here until it sells, and then we can move to Texas or wherever you're going.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I did want to add.
We're going to get a few final thoughts in here. If anybody has any last minute questions, I realize that we're running a little bit over an hour right now, and I want to respect everybody's time, including our panelists here. David says, great advice, John. Any questions for any of us? It's easiest. You can send it to us directly in an email if you have any questions. info@leavingthebayarea.com. info@leavingthebayarea.com. While we're waiting to see if we have any other questions. Final thoughts from our panelists. Alex, what did we miss?
If I could just jump on one thing there is, one of the key points there, just dovetailing onto what everybody else had said is, again, all critical points. But one of the things that Denise, and I'm the one touting her because she candidly does an amazing job, is she's literally studying the properties as the ones that sell over asking. And she studies to look at the trends. She's online clicking away like, okay, wow, this one sold this much over. What was the kitchen like? What was the backsplash like? And so she's looking for trend lines to be able to adjust. And one of the things we do, and I'm sure everybody here does, is we call them go-sees. If you're thinking of selling in the next year, 6 months, 3 months, whatever it is, we'll do a go-see and actually go out and give people a checklist. Like, look, if you're able to get these things done, you've got this much, range or this much of a glide path. Let's try and work in this direction. And here's the things we would recommend right before you go to market. It's up to you. You're always in control of your own rudder as you're leaving the area or whatever you're doing, but at least give them good optics to decide what they want to have done. But that's what really one of the things Denise does very well.
Absolutely. And just a reminder for everybody, if you missed a portion of this, or if you can think of somebody who would benefit from watching a replay of this, we will have this available in about a week, probably sooner than that. But this is something, again, feel free to pass this on and forward it. Pat says, coming a lot from law and construction and a little from real estate, I say the seminar was excellent and a great use of time. Pat, thank you. Check is in the mail. John Foster will send that to you.
Thank you, Pat.
Let's see what we have over here. If somebody approaches you to buy your house and you use a realtor, but you don't list it on MLS, what price over comps do you ask? What is a reasonable realtor fee to expect to pay if you find a buyer? Mm-hmm. Who would like to get that one? Okay, David.
Don't do it. What you should do is you talk to a realtor, and what you should do is just exclude that buyer from your listing agreement, right? So let's say you have a buyer in pocket, somebody approached you, maybe you can do it 1% per side, right? So the realtor can do it for 2% to facilitate that. But just exclude them, because the reality is in this market, when we're getting 100,000 over list on a $600,000 home, there's no reasonable way to put a percentage on it. you're never going to know what your property is worth until you get it listed. And you could address your concern by just excluding them from the listing and just offering some kind of administration fee for that.
Buyers are having to get pretty aggressive and creative in finding homes. And we understand why, right? But it can sound enticing to have a buyer come in and say, hey, look, I'll take the house as is. You don't have to do anything. We're ready to go. It just doesn't make sense. There's so much that you could be leaving on the table if you go with somebody who just happens to be aggressive and happens to be a good salesperson, meaning a buyer salesperson who's coming in and says, I'll buy it. You want to put it on the open market. You still want to invest the money into it to get as much out of it as possible. Right?
Agreed.
Okay. It looks like we've got everything. So you guys are great. Thank you so much. Samuel says all fantastic stuff. Thank you heaps. Thank you guys so much. It's been a privilege to have you on here. Really appreciate your insight. And I think there's some value in it to do it again in maybe another 6 months or so. See where we're at.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting this. Your service has truly been invaluable. And we appreciate the partnership with you.
And thanks to all of our attendees as well. Look forward to seeing you on the next session. Hope everybody has a fantastic rest of the day. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, guys. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.